All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of the Takedown Breakdown here on the SHIPIT Nation YouTube station. Got my guy Nades here with me. Have a special guest joining us here soon, actually. Pretty excited about this. So it's going to be a good one today, I think. We'll try and get through everything and more. Quick breakdown out of the gate, going through it, the perfect lineup. We'll go through the winners from the 20, the 555. SHIPIT Nation, huge week over at the Nation. Our guy Kenny came through with another big week, and one of our members won $100,000. We'll look at his lineup from the $100 single entry. He's going to be doing some giveaways. He hit me up this morning, so more on that. Also, the Monday Night Football show with Title, Hoop, and myself is going to be 30 minutes earlier today, so just note that if you are sticking around and want to watch that later, that will be up. But Nades, bring you in, man. What's going on, buddy? We're back for another one, Week 13 breakdown.
Yeah, Week 13, a lot of close calls, but it was nice to see the community kind of come through. I had a really good week. The community obviously absolutely smashed. 100K, you name it, the sport going on. I mean, we had an NHL shipper last night. I mean, college football, like it's just all things are blazing right now for SHIPIT Nation. And we're not just saying that. You can check out the X and you can literally see the screenshots from the Discord. And that we're not just tooting our own horn to toot our own horn out here. But excited to talk through this. And Week 13 was good. If it wasn't, there's still a game tonight yet. So don't forget about that.
Yeah, I like the game for tonight too. We'll talk more about it when we get to that show later. But I think that's kind of the key. And just real quickly, you said that we extended the Black Friday sale through for Cyber Monday. So instead of sending out a whole new email list and a whole new everything, we know you're getting bombarded from all angles, but you can still get 50% off your first month. If you want to check it out, that's all the sports. You saw it. Go to our X right now at SHIPIT Nation. You can see the Nation celebration, all the winners this past week between NBA, college football. Shout out to our guy LSU Nick coming back off the stat correction and some 50K score in college football as well. Nick had a 20K. Basketball, our man Rio was up there with 20K, a bunch of other big wins, 7,000, 8,000, 9,200, all of that. And then Football Streets talked about the 100K, the 92K for Kenny, all that and more. And if you want the rest of season football package, you can still get it $99 instead of around $170 if you pay it monthly. And instead of over $200, you can just pay $129 and get it with Shiptimizer, so you have that coverage as well. So lots of good things going on there. Let's see what we got in the chat here. A lot of new ones. Sean Sullivan, Go Collect, Andrew, our guy Bader Bear, Coach Sab, Morse. There's Nick. Got you the shout out. BJ. Cody B, lots of good people in there. One real quick shout, just want to talk about this also because we do have a special guest coming up. NYG Fan 56. This is a buddy of mine. He plays a ton of different sports across the industry. So he plays NFL. He's sort of up there in all of them, really crushes even in esports, all this stuff. Excited to have him come on and review some of these winning lineups. I just wanted to show his RG profile there quickly. And then, of course, DFS Mastermind, can't thank you guys enough for the support. Just clarifying everything up front, though, so everyone knows. Sponsored by SHIPIT Nation. Get to SHIPIT Nation. That's projections, ownership, tools, all the stuff that you need to have before we get to this, where we're reviewing and going through application, all of that. But if you check out dfsmastermind.com, the promos are on for one more week. Just showing you the inside quick, though. The mind map course, 3 hours. And how long exactly? 3 hours and 14 minutes comes included. Even if you just sign up for the monthly, you still get entered into the $3,333 ticket giveaway. So all the promos are still on if you got your emails. Scarface interview coming up this week. And then NYG Fan, who's going to be on here a little bit later, he's coming up for an interview in a couple weeks from now as well. You can go through the site. Once you get in, you can get the strategy video, the 2 to 4 game slate. My NFL optimizer process using Shiptimizer will be coming up this week. Of course, SHIPIT Nation, if you want to check out Shiptimizer, go here under the tutorials, but it's meant to be a complimentary piece where you have SHIPIT Nation, you get all the best tools, the most affordable, most value in one place, then go over and get that PhD in just education, strategy, all that and more. We will be looking at the stone. I really have a bone to pick with just on some of these things. So I'm going to talk to that, like the Chase Brown situation days. We have enough conversation around that. But let's start with the perfect lineup. and the chat's talking about the thumbnail graphic. We got Russell Wilson. I know you watched the show yesterday. You heard me, man. I was close on this. I said, the Stone can't get me on it. The stack rankings can't get me on it. But I said, it just feels like it could be a way to play this game a little bit different. And sure enough, it ended up being what you needed to have here. So again, other guys, Bryce Young, Jaden Daniels got there in tournament winners, but this was the optimal stack. Nades, walk us through.
Yeah, first thing that stand out to me, and I think this is kind of what you were alluding to on the Sunday show is, man, these Bengals games just feel like this shootout because this Bengals defense is just absolutely horrendous. People can say analytics-wise, whatever they want to say, oh, they're getting better, blah, blah, blah. I mean, Russell Wilson just lit you guys up. I mean, this defense is horrible. So, hey, that's something to tuck in the kind of back pocketbook, right, and kind of tuck that back in the little Tambo's tidbits in the back of your mind, right? And just remember, hey, these Bengals games, it doesn't matter outside, inside, where it is. I mean, these things just shoot out. And especially when you got Joey B on the other side, right, that can push the pace with guys like Jamar Chase, right? T. Higgins, Chase Brown, who's super dynamic, super explosive. So first thing that stands out to me right here is how could somebody get to a guy like Najee Harris, right? Throw the Russell Wilson stuff aside, but that's also a pivot in a very, very, very popular range right there. But number one, the Chase Brown pivot, right? Throw the Chase Brown side. Chase Brown literally should have nuked the slate yesterday, but that's besides the point. He's 6,200, right? Same game, other side of the game, Najee Harris. That's how you get to a play like that. You leverage the field. Russell Wilson, who else is in that range? Justin Herbert, Anthony Richardson, right? Geno Smith, tons of guys that other people are going to. Nobody wants to go to Russell Wilson, mind you, in a 46-point total, which is the fourth best on the slate. And we didn't have massive, crazy totals. The only high, massive total was the Baltimore game, right? And you guys kind of pinpointed that. All the pieces are super expensive. Both of these teams have very good running games. They can just slow the game down, right, and run it. So from a total standpoint, that was good. And then, it was just good plays around that, right? The Mike Evans, Bucky Irving, we're going to see that combo pack a ton on all the review winning lineups, right? That it's literally the whole offense there if you're not playing Kate Otten. Well, Bucky Irving and Mike Evans is the whole offense there. So like that a ton. And then the Parker Washington is just a nature. I mean, he just falls in there, but guess who else was at 3,900? Mega chalk, right? 80 Mitchell, right? Everybody wanted to play 80 Mitchell, Anthony Richardson. So you could get to someone like this. You're probably not getting to this main build here, but I think the Milli Maker was the $20 Milli Maker was what? 200 and
it's up here. Actually, good call. It is.
So 18 points off the perfect lineup. So, that just shows you can definitely get to somewhat similar to a build like this, right? And there's a lot of leverage built into this lineup if you were to kind of build this based on what the slate looked like yesterday.
Yeah, we're going to get to Chase Brown in a second. Another thing you mentioned too, like the Parker Washington, right place, wrong guy. Brian Thomas, who still had a good game. And it was funny. He almost had a bomb that he walked in. The next play, he catches a 56 or 63 yarder or something that's not a touchdown, but the play before could have been a walk-in touchdown for just as many yards or more. But I will say that, Parker Washington is just a product of that, right? Ended up in a different spot, different price tag. Also, just of note, $1,000 down to Bryce Young, $900 up to Adam Thielen. And then you have like a mini game stack, a single skinny stack with Bryce Young and Thielen. You still have Evans and Irving on the other side. It's not really that weird after that. Then it's just the flip of Najee, but Najee could have been Chase Brown for 6 points less or whatever, and you could have moved your defense around off of facing against Bijan. So it's not that crazy what it landed on here. It's just kind of the nature of the slate and the way that it played out. But a lot of these plays made sense, and we'll see a recurring theme. Like you had a piece of Jaden, or even some of the winning lineups had Jaden McLaurin. Hoop talked about this on the show yesterday. One person, he just kept saying it. And that's why I said, when Hoop will say stuff like that, it's more times than not, it's correct. And you got to take notes and think about that. I was on Jaden. He was in my main core on the site. So I loved the combination, but didn't quite get all the other pieces there. But I just think this is a fine setup. Maybe people weren't getting to Andrews. I liked him a little bit in that game, thought he was fine. But even if you had like a 4K Henry here for New England, I know he got injured and stuff, but it was like still, what was it, 12 or 11 or 13 or somewhere in that range. So
yeah, you got 14. He scored 14 and a half. So, 4 points off, you still win the Milli.
Yeah, we got to talk about this too. This is where we talk about incorporating the tools, and everybody has their own sites and tools and data, and that's fine. Obviously at SHIPIT Nation, we want you to use what we think is the best tool in DFS. But this is what I'm talking about here. And I'll give just a piece of the process. Obviously, this show can't get into all of it completely, but like people keep fading stuff just to fade it. Chase Brown, and I know he didn't even end up on the winning lineup, so it's not even being results oriented. But if you're trying to make this guy a fade just because of ownership, fine. That's to each their own. But look at this on the slate, 33.1% to be optimal. There is actually nobody anywhere else. I think Kamara is the next closest in the spirit of time, speeding it up. Kamara, 21. After that, there's no running backs on the slate above like 15 for that. So like trying to fade this guy to get cute and make it work, good for you. I think it's horrible play. And I'll be honest and upfront about it. It's like, this is not something you need to figure out how to get different. In some lineups, yes, that's why you build a portfolio. But getting mad when Chase Brown starts getting there is nuts to me. He's $6,200. His usage is of like a 9K running back. And he's on a slate where none of the other running backs, as many good options as we have, none of them are sort of in that price range or allow you to do that much with it. That's why he's popping off the damn page. So I think that's important to remember is, you don't have to play him, but you also don't have to fade him just because of ownership. There is so many ways that you could get different. And one of the easiest ways yesterday, which I didn't get to myself, but how can you use them differently? Go Russ Wilson, Pickens, Freiermuth, Chase Brown. Even though Brown didn't fully get there on a lot of these winning lineups, he still scored quite a few points, good for his price. And you would have had the nuts on the other side if that's a way you got to it. I saw a lot. This didn't work out either, but I loved that everyone was playing Chase Brown and the Indy defense. And again, not about the result and what happened, but funny enough, if you're on Chase Brown and you weren't on Steelers, I thought it was nice that some people put it together and said, you know what? I'll beat some of the chalk on Indy D and on Chase Brown by plugging it together with the Bengals defense. So just one example of a guy that you can get to that is there's just no need of trying to talk yourself out of it. But if you want to fade for ownership, I get it. To each their own. But go ahead, Nades. Anything else there?
Yeah, that's how, the Discord was, oh my God, chalk got there again, right? When Chase Brown scored right away. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, you know how I played him? I played him with the Bengals defense, who was 2% owned, right? So there's ways to play them. And that's why you play in a portfolio, right? In my five lineup set yesterday, I had 4 Chase Brown builds and 1 Chase Brown fade build, but I faded it and I leveraged with the Steelers defense, which was obviously on my main team, which crushed, but that's kind of the way. I mean, you just don't see a 33% optimal. And yeah, you say negative leverage. Guess what? He came in at 28% owned. So that's almost 8% leverage or 7% leverage, whatever. Right. So like, it's just, that's just one of those plays. We had it earlier this week or this year too. We talked about it. It's just, that's one of those plays you eat good chalk, right? And you get different elsewhere. There's so many ways to play a play like that. And he could have literally buried the entire field for fading him. And now everybody's touting that, oh, I faded Chase Brown. He was an awful play, right? He could have literally buried everybody.
Yeah, and it's just that exactly it, right? Especially in the smaller field stuff or when people are playing single entry and stuff, like that's not the spot that I usually look to get cute at because this negative leverage doesn't mean shit. It's this play versus the rest of the slate. And just at running back alone, I'm just using part of my process to show you I don't care about this stuff at all as much as I care about this and then go looking around to find guys to beat it. And I get it. I even talked about this on the show yesterday. Like the nice thing about Pollard, he was $100 more, but you had to know what you were playing with when you did that, right? He's not the same play. He's not the same spot. He's there at a similar price point in a very good matchup. But I kept saying it. You're allowed to play both. I actually had a lot of lineups that had Pollard and Chase Brown. And I'm saying I like both those plays, but you don't have to pick between them always either. So we'll end it there. We talked about the perfect lineup. Let's go to the $20 Milli Maker. But before I do, our boy is here. Shout out to my guy, Dwayne. Dwayne, I'm bringing you in, man. What's going on? What's happening, Dwayne? We appreciate you.
Good morning, fellas. How's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
Doing all right. And I was saying I missed a little bit of the first part, but you did touch on the Chase Brown aspect. I don't get the victory laps saying I didn't play Chase Brown because he still had a ton of usage, plenty of opportunities, easily could have crushed even harder than he did. I mean, he put up nearly 20. The other options in that range, again, Brian Robinson Jr. just came off an ankle injury. You didn't know where he was. Pollard, the Titans offense, has been hit or miss the entire year. There were way riskier plays around him. So, yeah, you can get cute and get off of him, but it's not as though it was immediate options you could have gotten to otherwise. It's like Bucky Irving was popular as well. So, again, it's one of those where, there were other spots to deviate from, and we could probably talk about one of the other ones because looking at the Milli Maker lineup, I had to laugh because I'm like Westbrook Akine getting there again with no volume. It just I know it gets me, I know it gets Hoop, but it's just like that guy. He just finds a way, even though he only gets like 4 targets a game max. He just finds a way to get into the box score. It's quite comical.
Yeah, love my guy Dwayne. All business, right? Just strolls in here, Nades, and just starts getting right to the process. I love that about you. And just so people know, I've had the pleasure of meeting Dwayne a couple times, couple different live finals that we've been at. One he was with his pops, actually brought his dad out to be at it with him there. And Stroud, I know Stroud didn't do everything you wanted him to do that day, but it was a great event and we had a good time. So Dwayne has played a ton of DFS across all sports. I showed it off earlier, Dwayne, but maybe just give the people a little 2-minute spiel about yourself. Obviously, you've got the interview coming up on DFS Mastermind later this month, but shout out to you. What's sort of your 2-minute background here you can give the people?
Yeah, I've been playing DFS for several years now. I also host a podcast, so Fantasy Throwdown podcast on iTunes, Spotify, all the usual spots. But, basically play every sport for the most part on my end. So whether it's hockey, football, basketball, baseball, definitely cover all types of trends. But it's like, for me, I always try to look at it from the standpoint of different types of spots. So like, yeah, we'll definitely talk Milli Maker, but I always look at it from the standpoint of, especially when we're doing single entry, I think it was just a bad idea for folks that were talking up avoiding Chase Brown and single entry. It just, to me, like certain plays, like just make a ton of sense. Like, and most of the chalk, they were all very reasonable aspects to get there. So that's why it was a very, straightforward week, except for the fact that we had one game turn into an entirely different script overall, which involved Chase Brown, which is why Chase Brown didn't crush his hardest, because the other guys got there in other aspects, because it turned into more of a fire fight between the Steelers and Bengals, which that first half I kind of describe as, for the boxing fans, as Hagler Hearns round 1, because like that total for the first half, I mean, even Red Zone was having a hard time keeping up with that game. So, again,
well, I know scoring ever, I think they said, between those two teams. Obviously, we get the AFC North battle. They played 100 times.
Like it had over 50 years of data between the teams. It's like what are you gonna do? It's like that is one you cannot project for. It's like that was off the charts.
Yeah, I always talk about a good sample size. That was a real sample size. So, Nades, I'll kick it over to you, man. Let's start pulling through this $20 Milli Maker. It was Teddy Bear 77. I'll let you walk through it, and then I'll kick it back to Dwayne, get his thoughts on this one. But it was a Jaden Daniels lineup, and a bit of a blowout here, right? We saw 236 was the perfect lineup, only 18 points off, and quite a few ahead of the second place lineup here. So Teddy Bear, not much of a sweat. Nick Westbrook-Akina, I think Hoop called the exact yardage and touchdown yesterday on the show. He said, we know he's going to get his 27-yard touchdown, whatever. I don't know exactly what it was, but it seems like it's the same play every time. Go ahead, Nades.
Yeah, first thing I'll say is 777, little stack ranking action, right? Going in on it. Lucky 7, ship the Milli with Jaden Daniels. But the first thing I see is you literally capture damn near the entire offense for the Commanders, right? At very, very low, no ownership, right? Terry McLaurin, 2%. Jaden McDaniels, 2%. Brian Robinson to capture the red zone with B-Rob and Jaden Daniels, right? One of them, if they're in the red zone, is likely going to grab the touchdown. It just so happened that Terry McLaurin caught his 4-yard touchdown pass for a second one, right? So literally you can do whatever you want after you have that main stack, because people are spending down at quarterback, right? They're going to Herbert. They're going to Anthony Richardson. So you flip the build, right? You go up and you play a Brian Robinson, who's also a pivot off the Chase Brown, right? For whoever wants to say that. Chase Brown's still a good play, but in a way, how you don't play Chase Brown, you play it in a sense like this, right? Where there's a pivot in there. It's attached to your stack. It's attached to the game you're attacking. And you run it back with Westbrook-Akine, which, hey, whoever wants to, I mean, you can say what you want. It's crazy. He's got 18 catches on the year for 7 touchdowns. So, I mean, you want to talk about volume, it's just not there. But, I mean, if you're playing a Westbrook-Akine, you want him to be in a game where hey, you're expecting the Commanders to be smashing, right? And you get that long touchdown bomb from Westbrook-Ikhine, which has happened 6 weeks in a row, right? And he's $4,300. So I like that. And then you just play the good plays around it, right? Ladd McConkey, who doesn't need Herbert, doesn't need anybody, right, attached to him. He's just a PPR monster. And the homecoming game, right, back in Georgia, all the things there. And 6,100, I mean, he's a wide receiver one with volume like AJ Brown in that, and he's $2,000 cheaper, right? So that's a great play there, and you just plug in Mike Evans around it, and you land on Freiermuth right there in that high total game, right? So overall, I like the build a lot.
Yeah, one thing that stands out to me is just it only would have cost him 1.9. So Dwayne, I'll kick it to you, but also he could have just swapped out. But like, I don't actually love Jaden Daniels, Brian Robinson together. It's not. If anyone's watched for the first time, thinks I'm shitting on a Milli Maker winner, it ain't that. I'm the one who always preaches there's nothing to shit on. They won the $1 million. This is the whole point. I'm just saying from a review and build perspective, it's funny. He had the $100. Chase Brown, 6,200 would have been the secondary stack with Freiermuth, and Freiermuth cuts into that ownership big time. He still comes in way under, even though he gets to 50K, and he only loses 1.9 and still crushes by 10 plus points to ship the thing. So however he wanted to go about it, I think the lineup is great that way. I just noticed that after the fact and saw the $100 was sitting right there. What's your thoughts on pairing Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson, and then anything else you see with this one in particular?
Yeah, it was interesting because, I was thinking about that same thing, Tambo, like with the Chase Brown, $100 more, but the only, and this was like, I was just trying to break it down, like rationalize, like, okay, Eckler's out. Who's actually going to be the pass catching guy in this offense? And that's where I was kind of leaning towards. It's like, okay, maybe he's thinking all the work's really going to Robinson because the other guys really aren't known as pass catching backs in terms of McNichols and some of the other guys that they had in Rodriguez, like in terms of that lineup. So, basically maybe you get a couple of catches out of Robinson, replacing the work with Eckler instead of maybe a wide receiver. So maybe that was the thought process. But yeah, the same thing I was thinking is just go up to Chase Brown. It's going to be the same amount of usage, if not more, in a script where he's probably going to get a little bit more volume than you would expect out of Robinson coming off of the ankle injury. That's why I mentioned the risk factor of Robinson is like, do the Commanders really want to work him that much in terms of the usage factor? But, again, it worked out in his favor. The other piece that I found interesting with the build, though, was obviously Ladd was popular, but playing the Chargers defense, I wasn't really thinking about that script at all in terms of, you're getting the pass receptions from McConkey. I don't know if that was the thought process of, pass catching from McConkey. Maybe it turns into a little bit more of a volume possession type game, because normally you would do the back with the defense. The wide receiver with the defense usually indicates like it's a lower scoring game. So, maybe they were thinking more pass receptions for McConkey, and Chargers defense plays well on the road in the dome. So, it was interesting just how that worked out. It's like, I don't know if it was the salary of just kind of getting up there and skipping a couple of the more popular options that were just below it, and just to get a little bit different. But I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, I saw that one too. And my guy Kenny, let's not even justify the process. I think if it showed Chase Brown in there, it wouldn't be as like people would look at it and just say it's fine. Like there's a couple other things. I also want to talk about two more things with this one. We usually spend more time on this and then move it from there. We've got a lot of good reviews that were sent in. So we're going to bring up some of your guys' lineups and look at those as well. But I think this is something you have to keep in mind too. So I've done this speech forever. I'll pull it back down so we're not blocking Dwayne's face, but it says Ladd had 25 points. Herbert had 8. Wild. But I think we got to go back now to what I always do my speech on around game or team total, not equaling player points total. Like it's a PPR game. We just saw it last week where McBride had 28 or 29 fantasy points and they put up 6 actual points. The same thing goes with these stacks though. Like Baker had 12, but Mike Evans had almost 30. You just talked about Herbert had 8, but Ladd had 25. It's not directly correlated when you're talking about guys that aren't necessarily going to be touchdown guys. That's sort of the floor ceiling combination. That's the benefit of some of these guys. And then you have to factor in price. You guys hear me talk about this all the time. A guy like Jamar Chase at $8,600, I want him with Burrow. It's not often that he's going to have his, 8 for 160 0 game where I just need him at 8,600. Then honestly, is that even enough when there's probably guys at 4,300 that put up 21? So it's not necessarily going to fit the build. I want Jamar Chase for the days it's 6 for 150 and 3 touchdowns. And now that really boosts because those touchdowns matter so much to Joe Burrow. Those yards start to stack up, the bonuses, things like that. So you got to keep that stuff in mind as well. And that's why you can see like Bryce Young. Yes, it was nicer to have him with Thielen yesterday. Of course, that'd be the best way to put him and not play the chalk David Moore and all that. But Bryce Young at 4,700, if you have no clue who he's going to throw it to between if you want to pick Thielen, Moore, Tremble, Hubbard, whoever it might be, you can just play him and then get away with this combo pack like they were talking about. The combo pack here of Bucky and Mike Evans is what? 11, 12, 5. Like it's nothing. For you want 4x out of those two? I think you could see almost 3x come from just Mike Evans or just Bucky by themselves. Then you put the two of them together and get almost 60 out of them. Like that's how you can get away with it. And then nothing says you need Baker for that combo. Of course it can work, and that lineup's going to make sense too. I'm just saying for starting to understand it and see it differently of ways you can get away with these things, price matters too. 58 and 67, they don't got to do as much together. So did either of you have anything else you want to add on this one? I think that's
yeah, I just want to hit on Al in the chat here. So it's very high likelihood that this dude did hand build because he had 7 teams in the Milli and he used 6 different quarterbacks across 7 teams and just kind of spread it out. So very likelihood that he definitely probably hand built or virtually hand built. He didn't throw in a CSV. I'm pretty certain looking at his exposures. So didn't want to call that out, but we're not analyzing it like what Nguyen said in the chat. We're analyzing how you can implement a process like this and get to a similar construction. Not going to say that if you do, right, it's going to ship the Milli because that's results oriented. We're just saying in a process wise, what we had in front of us yesterday, looking at the slate before all the puzzle pieces are there and the pictures in front of us, how could you got onto a build like this that is different than what the field was doing? And that's kind of how we're trying to talk through it. So
we never get to play this slate again. The beauty of DFS though is we get to play the next slate. So we're always just trying to take away, pull ideas and concepts and theories and things that we can use moving forward. I talk about it all the time. The new project with DFS Mastermind as a complementary piece. You need SHIPIT Nation. You need tools, data, ownership, projections, optimizers, whatever you use out there. Obviously, we recommend or are biased to SHIPIT Nation, but you need something to get your starting point ready. But all this type of stuff is what we're taking away to try and figure out where you can be prepared for the next time and how you're trying to exactly. We're reviewing what the front of the puzzle looks like, how we could have gotten there, trying to apply that moving forward. And Chad said that last statement just changed my entire mentality. So it's like we're trying to give you ideas and concepts where you feel comfortable with it. And I know this is one of the biggest complaints, Dwayne. I'll go to you because I'll pull up the 555 in a second that we're about to go to. But this is something that gets talked about all the time. I know you do a podcast and try and talk to things around this stuff as well. Everyone always says, all the content is always geared towards MME. Well, this is an MME tournament, sure, but we're taking ideas and concepts and trying to boil them down to where you could even get comfortable within making a single entry lineup where you're landing on something and saying, does this really make sense? Oh, Tambo, Dwayne, and Nades talked about that last week. I see these prices on this running back and this guy. I don't need their quarterback. I still have this stack instead. That makes sense. So I still kind of have it all given together. So I just think it's little things like that. But do you have any thoughts just around, boiling the content down to just a theory-based item?
Yeah, no, in terms of where you're holistically trying to approach the slate is, you're trying to find different avenues of where you're going to build. It's like, ideally, it's like you should have an idea in mind of how many lineups you're going to play in a given slate. And just from that, start working out realistically, where am I going to concentrate my exposures towards based on how many lineups you're going to play. If you're playing 150, obviously you can have the larger player pool. If you're playing 20, it's a different thought process. You should be starting to cull down those lineups just so you can have a different mix of combinations, but have a concentrated core as part of that, just so you're not trying to scatter shot into the wind and hope for the best that it's going to work out across 20 lineups. So that's why, again, even from the analysis of did he hand build or use a projector, it's like, yeah, he used a couple of different lineups, but like there was some thought between some of the plays that he did, because some of those you weren't necessarily going to get in a sim necessarily or opto. It's like there had to be there was some additional tweaking behind the sim. So like that's where, when you start doing the lineup reviews and kind of go through, it's like, there probably was some more thought process in terms of overall framework of like how rosters can get constructed.
Yeah, and he didn't really use the same core. One guy he was higher on was Freiermuth for sure. In multiples, Indy defense in multiples. Ladd and Nico were higher, but that's also, he was on the Houston game as well because Stroud was actually who he had a couple lineups with, and then had Mixon in the other one. So like little things like that, you can always go and check and look at. But yeah, it's a good call out by Justin just to ask what he was doing. That's the case. But Dwayne, take us into this one. So this is the 555 Milli Maker winner yesterday, and it is a Bryce Young lineup. So can you see it up there on the screen?
Yep,
and then
I got it.
This one.
Yeah, so this was the interesting one because I saw the stack and it was one of those where it's like, you know what? I felt good enough about where Herbert was in that lineup where I felt Ladd should crush. So like that, I went with Herbert Ladd as my primary stack, but I did like very much Baker and Evans. Our winner went with the other side of the comeback script necessarily because he still had Evans in the lineup with Bucky Irving. So you're expecting Tampa to be putting up points and Carolina to be kind of in a chase script, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Now, the aspect here that I thought was really interesting overall, though, was the fact that Thielen was in the flex. Part of the reason why I think Thielen was in that flex was it still wasn't entirely clear by kickoff that Thielen was like all clear, good to go. So you still needed that flexibility just in case, something goes sideways and he isn't all systems go, because if he's not systems go, like realistically, part of that slot work probably does go a little bit more to David Moore or someone else, because primarily Thielen was working out of the slot yesterday. And I thought that's where you were going to get your value out of Carolina as a whole, just in terms of certain aspects of going after Tampa. You want to go over the top in the passing game. Thielen can at least work the space of the defense. So I thought that was like one of the key aspects of the build is that, once you get the confirmation, like, yeah, you all things are considered, but have backup plans in place of where you can kind of go to, whether, again, it's the flex spot. So you're not limited to wide receiver. So, maybe you go to an Andrews or a couple other spots in that high 3K to 4K range where you can kind of do a pivot because, obviously you saw he was maxed out on salary. So if for any reason Thielen's out, you can't go to Leggett. You can go to Moore, but, that's still leaving a bunch of salary on the table. So, you always got to, start thinking about the possible pivots in certain lineups. But in terms of, the studs that, we all know about, Kamara and Puka, that was a build that a lot of folks were kind of doing runbacks for in terms of the slate, which made a ton of sense. Like Puka's usage in the Rams offense, obviously is quite high, even with the time he missed being away with injury. And then Kamara, you saw what Saquon did to that defense. So, Kamara, I had absolutely no issues with playing him in a lineup this week because, again, he's going to get the usage. The only fear with Kamara is from the standpoint of, does Taysom go off? And, obviously, unfortunately, Taysom goes down with injury, but, that was literally the fail spot for me, was not necessarily Kamara failing, but Taysom going off, because usually in Saints games, it's one or the other. So it's some people I got questions on, can I play them both together? And I'm usually in the mindset of, you set the rule of max one between Taysom and Kamara for that very reason, because they're oftentimes once in a while in a blue moon, Taysom throws to Kamara, but by and large, they're negatively correlated. So I usually try to keep them separate in my lineups. But to me, Puka and the run back with Kamara, I thought made a ton of sense. And then Marvin Harrison Jr. was the guy that everyone kind of thought was relevant in terms of some aspects. So he was in a lot of player pools, but it wasn't as though he was mega popular. It was just one of those where you're trying to find a guy in the range and you didn't want to play Brian Thomas Jr. So you play Harrison for $500 more. Again, same point range, so to speak. So, again, I had no issues with the build because all the plays made sense once you kind of factor it out. Obviously, the Jets defense was very popular. I had my doubts about the Jets defense, but when you saw that first half from Seattle, that was one of the more comical things imaginable, except for the fact that you had to remember, you had to remember that Seattle had the exact same first half pretty much against the Bills like a couple of weeks prior. So I don't know what it is with Seattle playing in New York this year, but whatever pregame routine they had, they got to junk that like right going forward, because like they had two of the worst first halves you could ever have playing in the state of New York this year, and I can't explain it.
Still came back, got the dub, and Gino got the
dub. But I will say that Seattle getting the dub is the reason why the Jets are having conversations on, should we just bench Aaron Rodgers for the rest of the year? Because that was as close to unlosable a game can get for a first half start, and the Jets still found a way to lose that game. Like that was inexplicable.
Gino wanted to post his little thing there. Nades, the chat's talking about this. I know we had conversation about this, so I'll kick it to you on this one. But the Marvin Harrison thing, everyone was pissed off. I mean, he had 7 targets in the first half, which was more than he had the previous week or whatever. And then by the end of the game, he had 12 and a touchdown and all this. So everyone seemingly was happy that it did go through him. But maybe just talk a little bit about that, and then anything else you see here with this lineup, Nades.
Yeah, the coach speak thing. I was kind of kicking myself a little bit. I still like to play because I like the game environment. I like this price point. I mean, he's wide receiver 1 that can literally get there on one play at $6K, right? It's not like you're paying $8K for this guy and the coach speak coming in. But I will just put it out there, right? Just to be hesitant on this coach speak stuff. We see it, right? Oh, limited snaps. That means they come in and they get 10 red zone snaps and get every red zone target and catch 2 touchdowns, right? Or the game's going to run through them. First drive of the game, it's Connor, right? Everybody's tilted the face off. They got to realize, number one, football is 4 quarters long, right? So they play 4 quarters of football. And the game script, I mean, it was there. I mean, it's still – he had all the opportunities and he got 12 targets. I mean, you tell me coming into the slate, you're getting 12 targets for $6K in a dome in a high total game, right? In the Arizona offense. I mean, I'm going to sign up for that every day, right? But I will say, just be worried about the coach speak. We see this all the time, right? It's limited snaps or limited. They're only going to get 10% snaps, whatever. Like Puka, right? Puka, he's going to be on a pitch count. Comes in and literally has 10 catches in the first half, right? So stuff like that. Just be worried about that. The thing about this lineup I see is the 2 onesie positions, right? The tight end and the defense you got from the early games. You landed on Marvin Harrison from the coach speak, and then you got everything afternoon, right? So you avoided all their early chalk, right? The Chase Brown and all that stuff that we don't have to harp on again. But don't be afraid to just go in on your spots, right? And our guy in the chat talks about I haven't overstacked games like I have until I listen to the show, and that just goes back to a parlay. There's a reason 12-leg parlays pay a bazillion times more than a 4-leg parlay or a 3-leg parlay, right? You just need way more shit to go your way than not, right? So if you're going in on a spot like, okay, Carolina, Bucky Irving, Mike Evans, underpriced for their roles in this offense, they get it going. Bryce Young, super cheap with Adam Thielen as a pivot off of David Moore, right? Coming back. And then you just go in on the Kamara and Puka Nacua volume guys in that popular game because you know you're different enough, right? You got Bryce Young and you got Adam Thielen. So you don't have to worry about the chalk there. So that's the only other thing I had to add. The Jets defense coming in that popular did kind of surprise me. That was kind of wild, but that's just the nature of the beast. I mean, I don't know when DraftKings is going to go away with this defense position, but hey, it's here to stay for now. So
I thought Indy was going to be more popular.
They did try the super flex model last year as a test run. So we'll see moving forward what the overall strategy is. But like they were experimenting last year.
Yeah, I was just going to add on this one quick. So we look back. That's the thing. RMD Bass 81 played 1 lineup. And you never know. Again, this goes back to Al's point earlier. Like we can only assess it from what we have at hand, but we know from looking, they played 1 lineup. To Nades' point, they did have a lot of afternoon going. I don't know how good you feel. Like you got to feel all right when you get 17, 14 and a half, and then 16, even though it's kind of from the chalkiest defense. But what it looks like to me too, is like whether or not they late swapped, I don't know. Again, like you said, we didn't really have the full on setup or the news, but it also looks like they did just plug in. Like I'll take whatever I can get from the best plays in the afternoon. There's a little bit of a stack in there and see what happens. And in the end, what happened was $1 million. So congrats to the winner. But like 28, 25, 25, 15, it was like, okay, Bryce Young, Kamara, Bucky. These are the best 2 afternoon running backs that everybody likes. Puka, the one that everybody likes, goes as a secondary. I still like Mike Evans. Maybe I can't get to what would it be here? Like, I guess it could have been Baker and David Moore, but at this point, it's like I'm going to go with Bryce Young and Thielen to give me a little leverage on top of these other big, high-owned plays. So to me, don't know if they did that, but certainly a topic just to note for what you can do in the future is if you can be comfortable with missing or missing out, I should say, like be comfortable being uncomfortable by not playing some of that chalk in the morning, letting it go away, and then having yourself set up for the afternoon where you can say, look, I still got pretty good scores here. I got an awesome score out of my defense. I got a solid score at another onesie position where it's hard to get points, and it's not that bad for Marvin Harrison at 8% ownership. So I'm just going to fill it out now with what I think is the best plays from the afternoon, put some correlation in there and see what happens. And in the end, it leads you to the top for $1 million. So yeah, I really thought that was a good one there too. I want to do this one quick. Shout out to 940 boy. Got the job done. SHIPIT Nation member, $100 into 100K. The ultimate one here. Dwayne, nice. Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz. Then the combo pack we talked about. Sorry, Pollard on the run back. The combo pack we talked about with Bucky and Evans. Thielen on the other side of that. And then a little secondary with the Trey McBride and Arizona defense. And I don't hate 2 tight end in this build. I do hate it in some builds I saw overnight in some of the reviews. Because one tight end already fills out with your quarterback. So I don't even care about that or count it or dock it any points. Like it's just you're using it to make it happen with what you've got up top. But McBride is not a tight end. He's a wide receiver, top end dude. Like he can put up 30 any given week. We've seen 28s, 21s, like things like that. It's 30s a stretch maybe, but we know it's within the realm of capability. So Dwayne, I'll kick it to you on this one real quick. We talked about a lot of it already, but just quick thoughts here.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, this kind of goes back into the coach speak stuff is that, they could, again, Marvin Harrison Jr., great hands, like, great, but McBride just has to rapport with Kyler. Like, that is the reality of the situation. It's like, he still got targets, but McBride was getting targets too. So, to me, I don't have issues with McBride because, to your point, I treat him as a wide receiver versus a tight end. Right. So, no issues there. And then, again, from the standpoint of, if you're doing a standard stack and you expect one side to have the flow, you do the Commanders' offense is like, you got a pass funnel defense you're going into, so you target the passing game. You got McLaurin, Ertz still gets volumes. The curious part where I would be kind of looking at is just, again, sometimes you can do run back, sometimes you don't have to. I think in this build, like the only thing I would say is like the Pollard run back feels a little bit forced because realistically, Pollard's not really a true pass catching back. So if, for some reason, you get a lot of points coming out of Washington side, on the run back, I'm not necessarily seeing Levis checking it down to Pollard. I see him just airing it out and hoping for the best, whether or not it's a pick six or he gets a touchdown out of it. I just see him checking it for whatever it's worth, like when he gets down bigger. So like, that's the only concern I would have with these type of plays where you do the run back with run first running back in Pollard because of the fact that he can kind of get lost in the shuffle in the offense. So I would probably, I would look at it more from the standpoint of you could probably tilt that into another wide receiver and just shift it back or just, give up the $100, don't do the run back and just go for a pure annihilation script and just stick with Chase Brown and just leave it as is. So you take back the $100, go with Chase Brown, and take the floor there with Brown without having to do the run back. So, like I said, you don't always have to do the run back. You just got to think about it in terms of the script that you're kind of going with. That's my only issue with the lineup build is that we already talked about the correlation with Thielen being in. You got a chance of a comeback script with Carolina and just dump offs like going into the passing game. Pollard's the only guy I would kind of question just because and it happened yesterday. It's like he kind of gets lost in the shuffle if they get down multiple scores.
Yeah, I just want to tack onto that because again, I get why they did it because obviously it's like if I'm gonna almost double pivot here, I'm not gonna play Chase Brown and I'm gonna use Pollard, but I'm already on a Washington stack, so it makes sense to have a run back. And again, shout out to our guy Steve Jams, got the 100K shipper here. But just to note it, you also already had you had a 2%, a 0.1%, an 8%, a 6%. So like you didn't need to get that extra piece of leverage by any means, you could have just went and got away with it, no problem, to have Chase Brown here. And it's not even results oriented that he scored 10 more. It's more of what Dwayne just talked about, where you would have needed Pollard to probably get there early on and then cause Jaden Daniels, McLaurin, Ertz to be the comeback. It's just how much faith do you have in Tennessee offense? I think a lot of people thought the game was going to go this way. I mean, Tennessee just had their big week the week before, putting up 17 in the first quarter. Were they really going to do it again? And it's just tough to say, but I felt like I liked Washington to put up the points early and often, and that's why I would have been just fine if you had Chase Brown here as well. Going to go to a different one, Nades, just because, we got time limits and stuff too, but our guy Kenny's in the chat, and he had a huge day yesterday too, so I'm going to go to his in the 3K. He just plays one lineup. He said, the deal, boys. I play one lineup. So I'll kick this one to you first, Nades. But Kenny came third, so close to 200K. It's just, I've been there this season myself. It's not ideal. It's still a great day. Everyone's like, oh, you still had a good day. Yes. And he's just as happy. It's a great day. Never going to sort of poo-poo that. But it's also like how close it is. And you don't always get these chances very often. So Nades, I'll kick it to you. His was a Baker, Evans, Bucky lineup. He had David Moore, Chase Brown, Mixon, obviously playing a little bit more of the chalk here. He used 49.8. This is a much smaller field, though, much higher buy-in, right? $3,180, 267 entries. Go ahead, Nades.
Yeah, I love this build. I love how Kenny plays. And if you guys haven't out there, check out his interview on Mastermind. You can learn a lot. He plays volume, guys. That's just how he does. He knows he plays small fields, right? 267 people in this field is probably his biggest field that he played in on the weekend. But I like it a lot. I mean, he attacked a game. I mean, these percentages are higher than what you're going to normally see because of the field size, right? But he went in different. Not many people were on Baker, right? So he went Baker, Mike Evans, and Bucky Irving. He ate into that ownership a little bit on David Moore because most people were using David Moore as a secondary stack with Bucky, which was the clear cut chalk. He added in Mike Evans and Baker to add on to that. The Chase Brown play, he uses a blocker in a field like this. I mean, you just know that's just the most optimal play in this field. And he leveraged the Kamara, who is also mega chalk in this kind of field, with Taysom Hill, right? To Dwayne's point earlier, they're negatively correlated. If I'm not playing Kamara like yesterday, I was way underweight on Kamara because that was my process. I just didn't like him. I didn't like the price. I liked the other guys in that range. So I was way over on Taysom Hill. That's just kind of the way I play it. We talked about that plenty of these weeks, right? On these shows, Tambo, is if you're not playing not playing Kamara, right?
Yep.
Well, how does Kamara not get there? It's likely because Taysom Hill is the gadget guy, gets in there, runs the read option, runs the wildcat, right? Gets the running back carriers in the red zone, right? So really like the setup here. And he played volume guys and kind of lived in that mid tier outside of the spend up running back, which he knew was going to be contrarian because he's not playing Kamara in there. So he has the extra money, the $300, right, to get up to Joe Mixon. And he flips it with Taysom Hill. So overall, I love this build. I love the thought process. And this is a clear example of building for the field and the contest that you're attacking.
Yeah, talking about lineup selection. Go ahead, Dwayne. This is the thing, right? It's a $3,180 tournament with 267 entries. And he played this in the Thunderdome. He plays, a lot of different tournaments at the higher stakes. His interviews on DFS Mastermind, you're joining him on the same show. You're coming up later this month. But he talked about that on there and being able to sort of adapt. And this was better suited, he said, for his style of play. He realized it's really hard to manage all these lineups and figure it out and try and come up with all these different things. He's just better, and he doesn't like the home run plays. He doesn't want to play. His example was, which you'll appreciate this, the Deshaun Jacksons of the world now. Like maybe it's Marquez Valdez-Scantling or something like that. He doesn't want to go for the home run hitters. He wants to see, how can I play Baker with Evans, with Bucky, with Moore? Okay, make that happen. Then I'm not playing Kamara. I play Hill. My secondary stack is Mixon and Thomas. Those are both somewhat popular, but not quite. I mean, 12% on Mixon's low in this field, but I can still get Chase Brown and the Jets D in there and have $200 to play with. I thought this was good. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, this is where, you have to think about your contest selection. At a smaller field, this is where you can kind of get away with the David Moore play, because realistically, most folks in the higher stakes are going to play Kamara. And so by playing Hill, you already do the pivot. you spend up for Mixon, you correlate that with the run back with Brian Thomas. Again, it all makes sense. And again, in terms of your primary stack with Baker, you have a run back with Moore where he's still going to be involved in the offense. We still don't know exactly how Carolina's offense is going to work, but you still have a piece of the Carolina offense. You know, again, it's like because of the running backs he already selected, you're not necessarily going to a Tommy Tremble or like other plays like again, those were the other options, but that would take you out of the concept that he was kind of going forward with. I'm getting off of Kamara by playing Taysom. So again, in that circumstance, that's where Moore makes sense because you already have the other high floor plays that are in a high dollar range anyway. So, you know, a lot of times, like when you're in these smaller fields, there's going to be a lot of chalk you're going to eat into. You're just trying to get a little bit different in other spots. And again, Mixon outscored Chase Brown a couple other plays. That kind of gets you in a different spot. And then, of course, Bucky, while chalk, wasn't the chalkiest play in some of those higher dollar entries. So he still got you an edge over a number of other options that were being played. So, again, no issues with the build. And especially because you kind of recognize what your competition you're playing into. That's so important in terms of these fields of like kind of knowing like what some of the field size is going to be, and also where some of the folks are going to be on the high stake side. So it worked out, and solid build.
Yeah, the best players are doing this. Like McLovin's another example. Like look at all this ownership. But he has one play at 0.4%. 10 is like 2 in these fields, right? Like that's like a lower own because look at all the 25s and 50s and 60s and other stuff. BK Ryder, great at all sports, a couple leverage pieces, 6%, 7%, and just didn't play the chalk D, and he could have. He had $100 left to play the chalk D, and it would have been the difference in shipping the whole tournament. So, he gets another 11 points off of that and wins if he had just landed there, and he could have got away with it. He already had a 6, a 7, a 10. I mean, a 16 is lower for this field size. So knowing the field that you're in, playing it accordingly for sure. I will answer this one too, because Justin, this is a key part of my process. Again, if you don't have SHIPIT Nation, now's the time to go get involved, get over there with the Black Friday special. I know you do, so I'm not just speaking to you, but just, in general, you should be looking at optimizers and seeing what they're giving. Don't just take it as the be all end all. You use the optimizer as the first piece to say, hey, what does this give me? And then what does that make me think of using all this theory and stuff that we're talking about? And that's actually the video coming out later this week. I use my Shiptimizer process. It's an hour and 15 minutes on DFS Mastermind of me breaking it down and telling you guys how I use an optimizer for that same thing you just talked about. Before I go to your lineup here, Nades, Kenny said, small field is honestly what got me off of Bryce. If you would have told me his ownership ahead of time, I would have flipped it for Baker. It just didn't work. All right. So, and then he says, use the opto to figure out what the field is doing exactly. That is the key. You'll know that. And then that starts helping you make decisions with how you want to make your rules, your groups, your build settings, maybe seeing things differently than others, or you've got it going a different way. So just a little tidbit to share there. Nades, bring your lineup first. We got 3 or 4 to get through and try and get through within the time frame here. But Nades, you're up first. This is your lineup. You can walk it through for the people. It's best when you're here that you can tell them why you landed on this and how you got to it.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick, I just wanted to hit on Al's comment because he's been super interactive in here. I will say, Al, the afternoon chalk realistically comes in less chalk in the higher dollar fields you play because those are the sharper players, and those are the guys doing the late swap, right? They look and see, okay, who from the early game is likely optimal, right? And what am I behind on the 8 ball, right? And if I'm going into the afternoon with snowflakes, I'm probably pivoting off of Kamara. I'm probably pivoting off of Puka Nacua, right, to a guy like Kyron Williams or something like that, right? So I will say the higher you go up in entries or the smaller the field size, the ownership chalk that projected coming into the slate is going to be significantly less than what was projected for because people are trying to make cashes to get to the min cash if they're kind of dead for top prize. So did want to hit on that. On this build right here, I was in on Herbert. 3 of my 5 teams had Herbert. I just like the script a ton. I like the pay down. I liked what it got me for roster construction wise. So on this build, obviously I paired with McConkey. I ran it back with Ray, the guy that's always forgot in this offense. And the reason I like that also is because of his price point. And I didn't know, right? I didn't know if it's Drake London, if it's Kyle Pitts, if it's Bijan Robinson. Those guys are also way more expensive. And Ray McLeod is 4,300, a little bit more than Adonai Mitchell, right? So I knew going in that he's going to be low owned. He's attached to my game stack, and he's on the field for like 95% of the snaps, right? So he's out there, he's getting the targets, he's heavily involved. So that's kind of that. I really like the Bucky Irving play. I've been in on Bucky. People are saying, oh, but he's still splitting carries and stuff. If you watch the game and you watch the ball, it's his backfield, right? It's his offense. I mean, he's clearly the better back. And I thought they were going to be smashing Carolina. So I didn't think Rachaad White was going to be super involved as kind of the pass catching back. So I like that. I paired it up with Adam Thielen, who first game back off the injury got almost 70% of the snaps. He's significantly underpriced. And last year we were paying almost $7K for Adam Thielen in this offense, right? And he's going against the biggest pass funnel in all of the NFL in Tampa Bay. So I like that correlated. Talked about the Kyron or the Taysom play, right? I was under on Kamara. I had Kamara on one team, so I Taysom on my other 4 teams. Just significant, just the way that I kind of approached that. And the Steelers play, I was off. I knew I was fading Chase Brown in this team, so I was like, if I'm fading Chase Brown, I'm going up to Joe Mixon, right, as that pivot, but I'm also going to devil leverage it and play the Steelers defense, who, hey, kind of luck boxed into their score, right, with the late scoop and score. But it's just the reason I played them is because I was also I was pivoting up at the top off of Kamara and going up at running back instead of playing the 2 value backs and throwing in Steelers, and then Kyron Williams because I knew Puka and Kupp and Stafford and that in the afternoon window. And Kyron had the biggest, I think he was the biggest touchdown favorite on the slate to score, right? He was like minus 250 or something to score. So I really like that a lot at his projected ownership.
Yeah, I thought you did a lot of flips here. I'm going to go to the next one, let Dwayne take a new one. But just I'll say quick, not many Herbert lineups had Mixon, like the affordability wasn't there. So not only that, but you did like a bunch of flips here, like no Kamara, because you went with the ownership on Hill instead, but then cut in by flipping it to the other running back on the opposite side in Kyron Williams, but also paid up for the $300 more running back than Kamara as well. So the Kamara flip alone goes like 3 ways here because it's Mixon instead for 300 more. Not many have him in the Herbert lineups. It's Hill instead of Kamara, and then it's still going to the running back at cheaper at the opposite side in Kyron Williams. And then, of course, I like the Steelers versus Cincy there that you rounded out with. I'm very curious, Dwayne, to get your take on this one. So our guy Morse 84, 25-cent mini max. Usually, normally play the $3.20 max, but switch up my contest to fit my player pool. So I definitely love that. You and I think we even had a conversation on the interview we talked about where you can stay at the same bankroll management each week. But if you like a bunch more quarterbacks all of a sudden, you shouldn't just add a bunch more money. You should find contests that fit for your selection. My guy Degenerate 75 always does a great job of explaining that. Some weeks he's 8 lineups because he only really likes a couple quarterbacks. Other weeks he's like, I like this contest with 30 max entry, and I happen to like 3 quarterbacks this week, so I feel better spreading it out a little bit. But I'll let you look at this lineup. I'm most curious about the Mixon Collins version of the Bucky Evans. I know he's got Bucky in the lineup, but give me your take on that, and then the rest of the lineup.
Yeah, so interesting build here because realistically, you're looking at it from the standpoint of obviously Collins was getting some steam, but ultimately didn't get there in terms of ownership overall on the slate, in my opinion. But Mixon, you pay up, but you had Kamara there. Part of the reason why I'm curious just in terms of how he ended up on Bryce, if it was because he was trying to shove in all these early plays, that it's like you're starting to look around to see where can I find some value, because you're not going to necessarily get there with Herbert stacks at that stage. So again, when it comes to that Houston-Jacksonville matchup, I definitely saw points there. So I had no issues with playing Collins and Thomas. But like when you combine Mixon in there, it's a little bit interesting because now you're starting to think about, okay, was he originally thinking Stroud and then wasn't necessarily seeing options that he liked? So then he was trying to think about other stacks to kind of go after in the afternoon, because the Bucky play, I think everyone was on, but it's like Tremble, great value option in my opinion at tight end. And obviously I talked about Thielen as a pivot off of Moore, but again, it's a little bit interesting dynamic because you're almost in that same mold of Tampa gets up early, all the work goes to Bucky early to get the touchdowns, and then you're in that comeback script with Carolina throwing to get there, like from a correlation aspect. Okay, yeah, like believe me, I was attacking Jags D too with Nico and Mixon. I appreciate the feedback there, because that's the thing. It's like realistically, the way the Texans offense has gone, it's like because they haven't really gotten the big shots over the top with Tank Dell as they have in the past, like they have been a little bit more methodical in the passing game. So I can see the volume because both Mixon and Collins have been getting reception work. And then, obviously the Jags D is very gettable anyway. So like I wasn't worried about the points there, but it is a little bit of that interesting dynamic, because I know a lot of people would be saying you can't use the running back and the wide receiver in the same stack. And, it's not like a hard and fast rule. It's just you have to think about realistically how are they getting there. So I think there's still pathways to get there. And I don't have a problem with the build, because realistically the run back you have, there's a game script involved where you can get there. Like the game script in his stacks, you can get there towards. And then the Atlanta defense, it's a play on how popular Herbert is, in my opinion. Right. So you run that back to go against the heavy chalk quarterback of the day, and you see it works out, and obviously it did for him. So
$100 less than the Colts D2.
It's a unique way of going about it, but it's like I know where folks are gonna nitpick, but like realistically, there's a game script you can work through for both of the stacks that he was using.
Yeah, and I want to say something too, because that's a couple good points. Nades, you just brought one up that made me think of that too. So if you weren't, again, I always say about this, it's not a free square, but it's if you land there and you're not on the other side of it, then to me, it's just like it's not a free square, but you can plug in Atlanta. I don't have Herbert. I'm not playing McConkey. It's $100 less than the chalk Indy D. And same reason I said, again, not results oriented. It's not like Bengals D did good. I'm just saying they were the same price. And a lot of people were playing Chase Brown. That script would make more sense than Indy going up against Drake May, who's been running it like crazy and pushing it on the ground more than it's really been him throwing the ball around and fumbling and throwing interceptions and making mistakes. So to me, I thought that was kind of interesting. And then the other thing I'll say about the Mixon Collins thing, the only difference between the Bucky and Evans thing to this one is it's a little bit more expensive. But again, if you get the right matchup, as he mentioned, going up against the Jags D, and I think this matters more, and you get a potentially condensed offense, we know Houston can really just put that ball through Mixon and through Collins. And then, like you said, make it make sense with Thomas Jr. on the other side coming back. To me, the build makes a ton of sense. And your risk here is really, I don't know how he got the Tommy Tremble. Well, that's fine. Tremble fits the stack. You have to play one tight end and it fills the rest out. So I'm actually good with everything to do with that build. I thought it was a good way to do it. Don't have too much time. So Rune Man, though, has done, sent in every single week. So I do want to round it out with Rune Man. I had Newens and Wombat up. Shout out to you guys. I appreciate you sending your lineups in. Didn't get a chance to get to them today, but we've had you guys up and on before. But Rune Man here, Dwayne, I'll just kick it back to you for 2 seconds, and then Nades, you can round us out. He had a Stafford Cup. What do you got here? Stafford Cup, Taysom Hill, with MVS. Walk us through this lineup. Go ahead with this one, Dwayne. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah. So I could see where he was trying to go for a couple of popular plays, and then he knows Taysom's popular, so you do that as the run back as opposed to Kamara with the Stafford line. The issue I had with and this is just more in terms of like certain plays in general, like Stafford. The issue I have with plays like Stafford and Carr is that they have to get there with touchdowns. Like if they can't run. So like if they're not getting a ton of points in that lineup through the air, that's a problem. But like part of the issue is that with some of those plays at quarterback is that, again, they have good running backs. So there's a very real possibility that they're going to run it in for a touchdown, like between Kamara and Kyron. So that's what really kind of neuters the ceiling in a sense for Stafford and Carr, because realistically, you're not necessarily going to see a 4-touchdown passing game for them in most weeks. So it's a lower ceiling. So now you really have to hit on all cylinders that it ends up being a Cooper Kupp game where he gets targeted more than Puka. And oftentimes, like whoever the Rams will ride the hot hand in receiving. So, I get the salary difference between Puka and Kupp, or like why you might select Kupp, but it's like in the recent weeks, Puka's been getting to work more than Kupp. So like that's a little bit of a difficult spot. And then from this other aspect was the AJ Brown play. Again, I would probably look at that more as you need more shots over the top. And I would probably look at that more as a case for playing Hurts than anyone else.
Yeah.
Obviously, he has Aaron Jones and Ramondre, but it's like I would almost rather you take the salary savings and go down to a Gus Edwards and then pay up for a higher ceiling quarterback and pair Hurts with A.J. Brown. And then for the Will Dissly play, it's more like kind of like the box score. Like, we've seen Dissly get a lot of work, and Atlanta's secondary is suspect. So, it's an unfortunate goose egg, but it's understandable. But I would say like the more questionable play probably would be, in my case, like take the salary savings at running back, because we had a couple other options in the area that were a little bit cheaper, like Bucky, Gus Edwards. Obviously, Edwards didn't get there, but like the thought process is I would rather have a little bit more salary to pay up for a quarterback with a little bit more potential. Obviously, Hurts didn't get there either, but that's where I would kind of start in the process, is that, the quarterback selection, you were in a very narrow game script where you needed a lot of volume to go to Kupp, and for it to be a situation where Taysom also has like a higher pace game kind of go for. And, once that game started out a little bit slow, like Stafford and that build was never going to get there. But that's where I would kind of look at it from the standpoint of, there were a couple of plays where from a game script standpoint, you were in a very narrow window.
I would say, like you can corner yourself in. Go ahead, Nades.
Yeah, I have one thing. So in a build like this, I like to build if you flip AJ Brown to Nakua. The reason being is, to Dwayne's point, right? Stafford likely has to get there 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, right? How does that game speed up? Well, Scantling catches a bomb, Taysom Hill breaks off a 50-yard run for a touchdown, right? So I really like that setup. If you're going in on Stafford to double stack him, most people are not double stacking him with the 2 most expensive guys, Kupp and Nakua, who, hey, just both got there last week, right? They can definitely both score 25 plus. And that speeds up the game with Scantling and Hill on the other side, and then you fill out the rest of your lineup. So that's the only thing I would have did, instead of just playing Brown as a one-off, which not results-oriented, in a build like this to make it make sense for the upside of a Stafford-type team on the slate. When you got Herbert in that range, you got Anthony Richardson in that range that both have rushing upside. That's the only thing I would have did.
Yeah, and I'll show more of my process in the future, but I think just one thing I'll also note that I took away from this lineup is it looks like there was like almost a conscious effort to avoid the chalk until like what I would typically call the worst chalk. So just so people know my process part of it, like tight end chalk as standalone one-offs is typically the worst chalk. Defense as standalone one-off is typically the worst chalk. So if you're going to play no chalk, don't play no chalk and then only add it at what are typically the worst spots to play just the chalk. And that's where I would harness in my exposures and stuff like that. But I think it's not against it. It's not saying you can't do it. I'm just giving you the ideas why, because it's a onesie position. You can make it work with your setup there and pack it in with your quarterback. If it's at tight end, your defense, you can use it as going against, like in this case, I like that you used it against Anthony Richardson lineups, who we didn't see much of today, even though he was super popular this week and whatnot, and A.D. Mitchell. So it's not about where you landed. It's just the way the overall build got to. And then I thought Dwayne did a great job of bringing up the A.J. Brown stuff. I want him with Jalen Hurts, or maybe in some Lamar lineups as the run back, but to speed it up or something. But even then, it's like, if I'm already there, I just want to really rack up the full A.J. Brown experience and do it through Jalen Hurts. So I'm good with that. I think that's going to do it for this one, guys. So Dwayne, appreciate you hopping on, man. Give you a minute here to talk. Let the people know where they can find you, and then obviously they can find more of you if they want as well moving forward. But just appreciate you hopping on, man.
Yeah. So Fantasy Throwdown Podcast, basically any podcast service you have, whether it's iTunes or Spotify, you'll find me up there. And then you'll see me by my logo, NYG Fan 56, if I'm having a good night. So you'll see the LT up top on the leaderboard. So, I will say, guys, though, that coming into tonight, it's a very interesting slate because we have our first ever Jameis in altitude game in Denver. So I don't know if it's going to work out well for him in terms of touchdowns or throwing picks, but Jameis in altitude, I'm very intrigued by what we're going to see tonight.
Yeah, everyone's talking about Jerry Jeudy revenge game, but forget the little extra nuggets and tidbits from our guy Dwayne. Get on Jameis in altitude. Nades, final thoughts from you, man, before we get out of here?
No, thought it was great. NYG fan, finally nice to share the screen. I know we talked back and forth in the Discord and that. I see you in the NHL streets. Obviously, you're very good in there, and we've had our fun share of battles in the lobbies before, in satellites and things like that. So nice to share the screen with you. Happy that you're a part of this community. Looking forward to your interview at Mastermind. And overall, I thought we broke down the slate well, and hopefully some people in the chat can take away some process stands. We try not to be results oriented. We're trying to create a process and improve our process to get better and evolve with the game. And that's what we're here to do. We're not coming on here to ridicule and shit on lineups. We're trying to learn from it and figure out how you can get on plays and improve that going into next week. Right. So that's the whole process here.
Yeah, and a lot of what we talked about. If you want an optimizer, SHIPIT is the way. Even if you don't have access to the site yet, you can check out under tutorials and use that for free. These are all free tutorials. You click in here, you can see how it works for NFL Showdown, how to get the optimal lineup, how we do our anchors where if this, then that. The settings, the presets that we have set up are all in there, and you can check that out. And then the two promos real quick before we go. Just one, the rest of season promo, instead of $160+ for the last 3 months of football, $99, and then just $30 more to add SHIPIT if you go there. If you want to use the Black Friday special, I'll pop it up one last time. We just, instead of sending another Cyber Monday email, you get the scene from Succession where all the emails are just rolling in. That's what my inbox feels like today with Cyber Monday. Shit, I didn't even know I was subscribed to still. It's the best day to unsubscribe, but this is the spot here. You can use BF50. You get the $34.50 on the monthly for all access, or $49.50 for the first month all access. That gets you SHIPIT included for all the other sports. So check it out. Thanks again to Dwayne. Shout out to my boy Nades, always on here having a good time with you. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Smash the like. Make sure you're subscribed. For Nades, for Dwayne, and for myself, ToeTagginTambo. Let's ship it.